The Australian Red Cross has experienced its busiest year on record in New South Wales. Its emergency services teams were active for 262 days in 2022, providing a total of 8,000 hours of voluntary service. Joining me live now is the New South Wales Director of the Red Cross, Kate Miranda. Kate, I appreciate your time today. Can you run me through the year? Why was it so busy?
It's been an incredible year. We've had such widespread flooding. The sustained longevity and nature of the flooding has meant that we've had emergency services team activated since the Northern Rivers flooding in February. And between February and now, we've only had 36 days where we weren't activated. And that's because the scale of the flooding across the state has been so widespread. So we've been activated in the Northern Rivers, in the Murray Riverina area, out in the far west, the central west, and on the coast, on the east coast, central coast in the middle of the year, in the Hunter and the Hawkesbury in the middle of the year. So there's just been an incredible amount of back-to-back flooding events that have meant our volunteers have been in 171 evacuation centres this year.
It's so incredible. What sort of support has the Red Cross been providing flood victims?
So we're one of the New South Wales government partner organisations in an emergency, and our role is to provide psychological support to people who arrive in an evacuation centre. So all of our volunteers are trained to provide psychological first aid. And what that means is that when someone comes to an evacuation centre, it's a last resort. They're displaced from their home, they've got nowhere else to go. Usually they've lost contact with loved ones. And it's really up to our amazing volunteers to support them through that. So typically they welcome them into the evacuation centre, try to make them feel safe, try to make them feel calm, and really understand what their needs are. So for some people, that might be financial assistance, or it might be contacting loved ones, or it might be someone to help them clean out their house. So our incredible volunteers really support people through a crisis. And we just know with events like flooding, it disrupts people's entire lives for months and if not years. We've still got in the Northern Rivers region, people displaced from their homes and in temporary accommodation. There are some children who did their HSC living in a temporary accommodation pod. So just the extent of the disruption really takes its toll on people's mental health.
So, Kate, is support still being offered now to flood victims?
Absolutely. So Red Cross volunteers live in the communities where they work, where they volunteer, and that's one of the strengths of our program, is that people have local knowledge, they know the local people, and we are still active across the Central West. We're providing outreach in Yagara, and we still have a presence in the Northern Rivers as well. And once the flood events are over, Red Cross typically spends up to 3 years in those communities working on recovery programs.
And how has the Red Cross been dealing with demand this year?
It's been really tough. It's been really, really tough for us because quite often the people who are volunteering for us, they've had their houses damaged themselves, but they still stand up, they come into the evacuation centres, they help people in the community, even though their houses are damaged. But we're always looking for new emergency services volunteers. So people can go onto our website and volunteer for Red Cross. And we're just always trying to meet the needs of the local people and communities.
It's been a massive year, as we just mentioned. The floods, of course, were preceded by bushfires and COVID. It's had a huge toll on so many people. How are your staff and the people who support you feeling at the moment?
They're incredibly stoic. People always, especially Red Cross volunteers and staff, they see the demand and they want to meet that demand. So they don't rest. I mean, my biggest issue is trying to get people to actually take some time off and rostering people to ensure that they're not getting exhausted. But they see the need. They're always community-minded people. And we've seen wonderful examples of community spirit and kindness and stoicism. There was an example in the Northern Rivers where our Alstonville branch, one of the members was having a conversation with a local teacher who said, look, some of our kids the primary school kids were rescued off roofs and they're really, really frightened of the water. So our local members raised money to provide private swimming lessons for these kids. So it was really incredible sort of act of kindness. And I was speaking to one lady in Eugowra who, she's 80 years of age. She was in floodwaters up to her chest for 4 hours before she was rescued. And she has a really serious lung condition. So she had to be airlifted to Orange Hospital. And she was, in telling me her story, she still managed to have a sense of humour, even though her house had been completely flooded and she'd lost her car and so had her son. And she said to me, "Oh, Kate, when I got to Orange Hospital, I'm 80 years of age and the bed available that they put me in was in the maternity ward." So people are still, able to make a joke and smile through it, but there are others who are really, really hurting. And one of the things that we always look out for is people's mental health. And particularly we've seen compounding disasters over the last 3 years, from the bushfires, 2 years, 3 years of the pandemic, and now floods this year. There are some people who have been through 3 years of back-to-back disasters, and that's really taking its toll on people.
It's an incredible organisation, the Red Cross. Kate Miranda, thank you for your time today.
Thanks very much.